Hello and welcome to the very first Totally Human podcast. I'm Andy Carson. I'm an HR consultant for ProAction HR. This podcast is all about the things we hate about ourselves, the little foibles or psychological challenges we face every day, the tracks we play in our brain which make us behave the way we do. We're going to attempt to call out some of these, talk about our own personal experiences and demonstrate we all have them because we are totally human. Finally, we will offer some tips and hints on how you can tackle these brain monsters. In every episode, I'll be joined by the ProAction HR occupational psychologist, Jo Nicholson, who will add an air of professionalism and academic expertise to my somewhat chaotic, totally human ramblings. So, Jo, for our first show, we're going to talk about one of the biggest psychological battles I have, and that's the perpetual voices in my head telling me I'm not good enough, and it's only a matter of time before someone catches me out and exposes me for the fraud I am.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because the first thing that I've thought when you did that introduction was, I'm not an occupational psychologist. I've done my occupational psychology MSc. I'm very interested. I've got a health psychology MSc. I've done my undergraduate in psychology. I've worked for the British Psychological Society, but you can't call me an occupational psychologist. I'm not an expert. And even just knowing that we were going to talk about this made me go out and buy all the books I possibly could on imposter syndrome, put my hands on academic articles, to actually get all the information that I could on this, because who am I to talk about this? I'm no expert. But I think it's just really important to say that that is a clear symptom of imposter syndrome. I'm not here as an expert. I am here as someone who has a view, and that view is valid. Brilliant.
So you've used the words there, imposter syndrome. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and why it describes the feelings I've got of being a fraud.
Okay, so imposter syndrome was researched by Clance and Imes on women mainly, and they thought at the time that it was predominantly something that was experienced by women. That was this fear of being found out, the fear that you are being a fraud. 70% of women are feeling imposter syndrome. It's not just women who feel it, it's men, it's all ethnicity, it's all ages. There is some sort of evidence that the older you get, you feel less inclined to feel it. Now, I remember the first time when I came across it as part of my occupational psychology MSc was sitting there in this seminar room thinking, oh my gosh, this has a name. I've been feeling like this my entire career. It has driven me to get no end of qualifications so I can prove that I do know my stuff. You know, everything I've done, I've got to get qualified. I've hidden behind qualifications, and I'll be researching something for a presentation to make a decision at work to the nth degree, never finishing the research because there might be something else out there that's going to give me the answer that's definitely going to be right. And sitting there going, my gosh, it has a name. And I never knew it existed. And yet I'd worked in big corporates for over 10 years and obviously sat there feeling like this, and there was lots of people obviously from the stats feeling the same. I just never knew about it. You've had a similar experience as well, Andy, you were saying.
Yeah, I think the same as you. For most of my career, I have always had doubts in my head. So, some of the nagging voices in my head, I think, are a little bit more than imposter syndrome sometimes, but there's definitely that issue in my brain saying I'm a fraud, I can't do this, I'll be found out tomorrow. And then it'll all come crashing down around me. And that's a horrible feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what it then does is drive certain behaviours. Now, I know that you've had a very successful career, and, you know, has it held you back, do you think? Or, you know, what do you think it's changed your behaviour at work?
I think it probably has held me back. I have had a successful career, despite imposter syndrome, and I do sometimes wonder how much better my career could have been, how much more success I could have had if it hadn't been there, putting those doubts in. How many jobs haven't I gone for because I've gone, no, there's no way I could do that? How many times have I turned down opportunities? So whilst I can't tell you why it happens or what is happening, I can tell you how it feels to suffer from imposter syndrome.
Do you have any ideas yourself of why you feel like that?
Well, it's funny that you said that 70% of women feel this way. As you know, I'm gay, and I do think that underrepresented groups tend to feel this way more. There's probably a whole load of psychological reasons for that. But it probably comes down to the fact that both women and underrepresented groups always feel that we're having to push harder to be something that isn't automatically an entitlement. And I think when you are striving to be something and you're striving to achieve something that isn't an entitlement, you have to work harder. And when you work harder, it looks like you might not have the same qualifications or entitlement as the people who automatically get it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's also something called Entitlement Syndrome. So it's almost the reverse, you know. And just watched a very interesting lecture where Boris Johnson was mentioned, and you know that feeling that or even to the Trump extent, where that feeling that you are entitled to this, and it's not necessarily a good thing either, is it? It comes with its own consequences. But yeah, I think that a lot of people out there feel like they have to work harder. They feel like they don't deserve it because there's that societal background. For women, for example, and I'm very passionate about women back in the workplace, and particularly after birth of children, is there's still that inherited view that I should be at home looking after my child. It's not ideal, but it's still there. Even if it's in the back of your mind that you're going to the workplace feeling that I don't belong here, I shouldn't be here, I feel guilt. Now, those are the sort of the feelings you can think and feel. It doesn't mean that they're right, doesn't mean that they're true, but you may then start doing some of these things to compensate for that. And before you know it, you're questioning who you are. There's a lot as well in there, obviously, in how you were brought up. And we know that with many things, and a lot of the discussions that we've had, Andy, on a lot of the things to do with psychology and well-being in the workplace, we seem to bring back to our experiences when we were much, much younger. And, that will always play a part. And we often bring it all the way back to self-esteem. If you don't have that inner belief in yourself, you've got that critical voice in your shoulder, and everyone will get that critical voice. Of course they will. Yes, it might have gotten you a promotion, but I don't know if you'd stayed there feeling permanently like you didn't deserve that promotion, and then you kept on working, then you're going to reach burnout. I know in the workplace, I worked long hours. I was there last out of that office. Yes, I wanted to be reliable, and I was very conscientious, and I wanted to drive my career. But I was there because I didn't have any confidence that if I hadn't got that work done to that standard, that was good enough. I was there because that permanent feeling of being found out. If I left the office at 5 going, no, I've done my hours, that someone's going to say, yeah, but hang on, it's not good enough. And I'm not saying not good enough that wasn't staying later, that my work just wouldn't be good enough. So I just worked all the time.
And it's interesting to say, because in my personal circumstance, that is how it went. I pushed, I climbed the career ladder, all the while with the voices in my head forcing me to do better and to achieve more, but then telling me I was rubbish and didn't deserve to be there. And finally, it did get to me, and I did have that burnout. So yes, you're spot on. Whilst in the short term, it created a career for me. Maybe I wouldn't have got to be an HR director or a head of organisation learning and development if it hadn't have been driving me.
Yeah.
So is it a friend or a foe? I mean, yes, as you said, at the end of I haven't ended my career yet, but at the end of my corporate career, certainly I would have said it was an enemy, but maybe I wouldn't have even got to those positions if it hadn't been driving me.
Well, what you'd like to think from a psychology point of view, that you still could have got there, but with a lot more healthier thinking pattern that wasn't going to create some of that unhealthy side effects for you. So, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't have done, might have just got there with a different driver of just accepting where you were. Your capability wasn't any different. The imposter syndrome didn't drive you to make smarter decisions, or you probably would have made the same decision on a piece of work if you just stopped looking at it 3 hours ago. It's about just being comfortable with who you are, and I think that itself is attractive to employees, and wanting to go, yes, okay, Andy does know his stuff. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's not saying that no one should hire someone with imposter syndrome, But if people are then going to end up feeling permanently uneasy or anxious and depressed or not good enough, then, you're never going to really achieve that full well-being at work. And, that's a problem, isn't it, for organisations, especially now. We want people to be feeling comfortable. And, I worry about people now working at home who haven't before. Some of those things that an imposter, for some, it might help. No one's going to discover me because I'm hiding here behind my behind my screen at home. I'm comfortable. Or actually, I can't show my work in the way that I did before. Does my work speak for itself? What's going to happen when I go back in the workplace? Am I going to get discovered then? All these anxieties maybe that, for me, I don't think that imposter syndrome is accepted within the workplace. It's not everyone sort of knows about it. It's not a new term, but are people sharing it? Are people coming out and going, oh, well, I've got that. I get that. How do you do it? Are the leadership team standing up and going, well, actually, I feel like that too, and it's got to me where I am. What can we do about it in our organisation to help people? And that's the bit where I come from, going, well, how can we help? A bit of my motivation behind doing this is, I'm not an expert, but I'm talking about it. If it encourages other people to talk about it and they say, I feel like that too, then it drives more increased awareness, doesn't it? And the more awareness, hopefully things can get done to help people feel happier in the workplace. And that's where I know we come from in terms of our approach to the work that we do, is to just try and help people. I heard something, again, in part of my research, was that things that aren't measured aren't attended to. We know that in the workplace that people generally, you respond to your KPIs and everything, your employee satisfaction, or, all these sorts of things you can measure, tend to be on the radar and can get looked at. And, for me, a lot of the psychological factors aren't necessarily measured. They aren't attended to. It's not necessarily on someone's radar. Maybe some of the good things that come out of lockdown could be that this is now on people's radar. People want to do something about it, but it's, can we get it measured?
And I suppose the difficulty behind that is that it's quite subjective, isn't it? Because your imposter syndrome is going to be different from my imposter syndrome. So we can talk about an umbrella term of imposter syndrome, but every single one of us is going to be different. It can cause me to do different things.
Yeah.
If I was going to ask you, what would the one question be? This is putting you on the spot. So what would the one question be that you would ask people that would help an organisation understand how big a problem they have with imposter syndrome?
Well, as you say, there's so many different ways that people exhibit this, and it might just be that, do they feel valued for who they are? And again, that's going to mean something different to everyone. But again, the work that we've done on other things, it just highlights the importance of your line manager, showing the fact that they actually care about you, that there's an element of compassion there. And if you feel that you've got that sort of compassionate response from your line manager, and it goes up and it's set, the culture is there with the board and people are demonstrating these behaviours, then actually you would get a sense of whether your line manager credits you and values you for your true sense, or whether you feel like they're attaching some sort of worth to you that you're feeling this imposter for. And I think that that's what's important to me, is, do I have that feeling of my boss valuing me for my true work? I think that would really help. Or that feeling of, are you ever going to get found out? Are you worried the whole time that you're going to get found out?
Yeah.
So yes, you did put me on the spot there, Andy.
I know. It's good though, because I got a really good answer out of you, so that's fine. I absolutely
there is a questionnaire though, they have been created, and that I'm sure that if organisations wanted to explore it, they can do that. And I think in the future there'll be a lot of work that will go into trying to assign some sort of psychological value, welfare to people that can be measured, and that would be good. But for me, it's that compassion in the workplace helps everybody feel more accepted for who they are, which I think is really important right now.
Good. So I said in the intro that what we've tried to do is give people some hints and tips on how they could help themselves as well. with all of the topics that we will discuss in this podcast series. And from my experience with imposter syndrome, and I've been working a lot on my mental health, my mental well-being over the last couple of years, really. And some of the things that I have found helpful are, first of all, talking about it. So this, for me, this is almost like my own personal coaching and counselling session, because it's wonderful, because I can actually admit that I have imposter syndrome. And no one will catch me out being a fake at it, because I've openly said I am an imposter. That's how I feel. I feel like I'm an imposter. Yeah. So talking about it and putting a voice to it is good.
Before you get to that point, you obviously have to recognise it in yourself. And I think for some, when you're caught up in that cycle of thought, very difficult to break that cycle and recognize your thoughts and realize that it might be unhelpful. And for some, it can be quite difficult to actually recognize it. So this is where this kind of thing that we see value in is if it helps people and go, oh yeah, that resonates with me. I get it. And I don't know what I've talked about when I recognized it. Do you know when you would have recognized it in yourself?
So I think, so my imposter syndrome, it all gets very muddy, because when I was pretending to be straight, I was literally an imposter. So sometimes I wonder if my career imposter was born out of the fact that in my real life, I was pretending to be something I wasn't. And I pretended so well that it almost carried over into everything I did. When did I first notice it? Well, actually, I'd read an article about imposter syndrome. So it was that helped me go, oh, okay, this is me. This is me. I've got those nagging doubts all the time. Even though people are forever telling me how good I am at something, there's always the nagging doubt that says, it was a fluke. It was lucky. You were in the right place at the right time. You said hello to the right person, and that's how you got to be where you are. I also realized at that point that we make our own luck. So the reason I said hello to the right person at the right time was probably because I put myself in that position to be there, and I knew the people I needed to talk to. I knew what I had to say to make the right impression. So sometimes I think, we say it's a fluke or it's lucky. Well, yeah, it's a fluke and it's lucky, but we've made those happen. We have created our own success through the luck that we have built for ourselves by being in the right place at the right time, or pushing ourselves to have a conversation with someone, or going and spending half an hour reading an article about this or that, so that we're more informed and we can have a discussion, and it makes a difference. So I think, yeah, slightly more complicated, because I think my imposter syndrome is a bit messed up with the coming out as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Andy, in the fact that I think there's a whole podcast on that in itself. And for me, you know what I want to do? I want to go now away and research what can I get my hands on. And I know there'll be a whole genre of work on this and what the correlation that is to imposter syndrome.
I was pretending and I was acting, and I was married for a number of years. I didn't come out till I was 34, so I was very good at playing a straight man.
God, I can't even imagine what, life's hard enough as it is, trying to keep up where you are and what you're doing, let alone putting on a whole.
And it saddens me every time I hear of an older person coming out as gay, and they've been gay their whole lives. So bringing back to the imposter syndrome and the hints and tips, we've got the awareness. So be aware of if you think this is something that you might suffer. I won't use the word suffer from. Something that makes you uncomfortable, because that's really what imposter syndrome does. It just makes you uncomfortable and not able to be the best you can be, because you've got that nagging doubt. So you develop that awareness and then recognize the thinking.
So recognize that that's what you are thinking, and understand that you're not alone. That's really important to accept that that other people feel like this, and also know that your thoughts aren't necessarily fact. They're not necessarily true. So it's about just being aware of that thought process and introducing that thought. Now, there's quite a lot of work out there and what people recommend, and one of them is to write down all the things that are the facts about what you are good at. You know, have it in front of you in black and white, what you're doing. And as I say, it can get quite complicated now, and probably we're in the realms of actually talking to a therapist to work through each of those things. But it's about talking to others, recognizing you're not alone, and understanding the facts where you are doing well, what you are doing good, and trying to change some of those negative voices to challenge them to know that actually they're not all true. I'm not a psychologist, so you know there is a lot of work out there on that, but there's lots of helps as well and tips to help you improve your own self affirmation.
Yep.
So you know when you're feeling like your self-esteem is really low, and you know what you can do to help yourself look at that aspect of your life as well. So there's quite a lot out there on that, which I'm just wondering whether that's something in itself, because for us that's a big driver, our self-esteem. And I started looking at it, and it's such a big topic of all that. Maybe there's some things around that we could look at and talk about specifically.
So that's brilliant, Jo, thank you. And I think today we've kicked off with, it's a meaty topic, but it's one element, isn't it, that we will then be able to look at lots of other different pieces, which is probably connected. But imposter syndrome, for anybody who's watching this or listening to this, they suffer from imposter syndrome, and you think, my God, how on earth can they feel fake?
Yeah.
So it's very real.
And I do feel the need to put my own imposter syndrome out there and say, look, you know, here are two people talking about this because we care about how people feel. And we want to just share our feelings. There are a lot more people out there who are experts on this, know a lot more about it than we do. And as you say, you'll come across them when you Google, and there's books out there. It's just that we want to try and just increase awareness and help people point in the right direction. And, you know, our company and the things that we do, we're all we want to go and talk to boards about it and help them understand it so that they can help the people who work for them. That's what we want to get out of it. But we do appreciate people who listened and hope that this helps them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's for. Right, Jo, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for listening. And we will see you next time for another podcast.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.